You are listening to TMI for the week of December 4th, 2017.
We're categorized as a comedy. I swear to God.
Well, yeah, okay.
So let me ask you this. You know, the options are really limited. I hate if you look on iTunes, there's like, the categories are pretty narrow. But news, oh God, what's it called? It could be news and editorial or news. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
There's a newsy one. But I just wonder if we'd be doing better in another category.
Well, I think, with the exception of the one, I don't think anything has been comedy related. The interview with Todd Glass was all...
And that was serious. No, it was... I don't know about that. Well, if you thought it was comedy, I took it as him coming on, you know, and being totally serious, talking about serious stuff.
But it was, I mean, he was a comedian, and you made reference repeatedly to comedy. The oeuvre was comedy, as opposed to non-proliferation, and that's what I mean. It was. Yeah. You just have that. That's how you entered that particular world. Where you went from there is. It
wasn't my fault, man.
No. So I'm just saying, who made the decision that you were? Did you make the decision?
That what?
About it being listed on iTunes as comedy?
Oh yeah, I'm an idiot. Well, we tried in the first few episodes to be
earnestly hopeful, not an idiot. Think better of yourself, David.
We tried to be talking about comedy, or we had little bits that we were trying to do. A few voices, a couple guests.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because, you know, most of the podcasts listed as comedy are not funny, and all of them, except for maybe 2 or 3, purposefully do not dump material. So even if it's comedians, they're talking about non-comedy stuff, but I guess they're talking about their road stories and anyway.
Yeah, well, they're not performance.
Okay, I get your message. We're not a comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a dark comedy, perhaps. If the French could, or it's German comedy, German industrial comedy, like Einstürzende Neubauten, if they were a comedy troupe.
But there's some tongue-in-cheek and...
Absolutely.
So, you know, you talk about Chugling and, you know...
So I'm your comedy content. I'm your second banana.
Whoa, you're also the news head. So what has been going on in the news this week? Do you have any idea?
No, I don't know what's going on in the news. I haven't really been paying attention. I've been swamped with concerns about Christmas and, you know, kind of, but I mean, bits and pieces. I mean, I know about Michael Flynn generally getting flipped, and Rex Tillerson on his way out the door, and apparently the tax bill is... It's weird to me.
Did it go through?
I don't know. I can't imagine that it went through, given... but it seems that everyone was quite positive that it would.
It went through quickly if it did go through.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear people talking. Yeah, I don't really know. If it did, I think that the two things in the next week or two that will be, I think, sound the death knell of any kind of hope that I have for a semblance of balance, is this tax bill going through and Roy Moore getting elected to the Senate.
Okay.
If those two things happen,
right,
and then I have no idea. The apparatus that I have in place to perceive the world,
thank you,
is utterly absent relevance.
Well, Rob Ford put me in that place of losing my grasp on the apparatus, as you put it.
Yeah. Well,
But that was-
towards the end, at the beginning, I could see he plays to the same crowd. It's just kind of once he's in your house, then he's shitting on the couch and rubbing it in your hair.
Nice.
But I mean, when he shows up at the door, he's there's a big billboard at Bay and Gerrard put out by the Ontario Federation of Concerned Taxpayers or some such label, and it's all kind of stop the gravy train kind of stuff, right? And it's the same kind of bland and directionless term that you get places like these super PACs in the States, right? That are supporting Tea Partiers and their more rabid, more recent ilk. It's the sheep's clothing that's arch conservatives wear in order to be to make it cross the threshold into your house where they start shitting on your couch and rubbing it in your hair. So, I mean, Rob Ford came across as earnest, and I mean, and how can you mistrust a fat boy? Fat boys are not threatening. All they want to do is kind of eat and be jolly, right? He was a jolly fat man, but he also was what he was, right? So, and Donald Trump never had that. He never had the padding of the excess body fat to make him more palatable. He never was anything but what he is, a narcissistic buffoon who wouldn't have existed anywhere outside the very, very tiny microcosm of Manhattan.
He seems to be acting like a contrarian.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
So, like, on the day that they had that big photo shoot where Schumer and Pelosi didn't show up, and they was trying to blame the failure of the tax bill on them right at the time where he really needed to rally support, and then started tweeting about it. And I think any advisor would say, oh, you'll hurt the chances of the tax bill going through. Maybe that will affect the government shutdown if one is looming. But anyway, every piece of advice that he'd be given, he goes against that advice. And then if he gets away with it, if the tax bill goes through, it says, see, I told you, common sense doesn't apply.
There was an interesting fact that resonated with me from your I guess last week's conversation with Helen Caldecott. She was talking about the tipping point of the tipping percentile of women in any voting or controlling body, whether it be corporate or political, as being 30%. She said, kind of you get 30% of women in any kind of voting or controlling body, whether it be corporate or political, and then you tends to you transition from being little outposts, outliers to outposts to cohesive voting bloc, and that's 30% is the tipping point from outlier to voting bloc. And it's curious, the thing that immediately occurred to me was 30% is the amount that is generally, persistently quoted as being the Trump's voting bloc. Trump's the lowest, his popularity is the lowest it's ever been. It's around 33%. And that seems to be enough to move the market. So Helen Caldecott is absolutely right, and it's just curious that is the number of people who still support Trump. I stopped off and got a bagel after I went to pick up my rent, and I was walking back from the bank, and I'm just being affable and polite with the two people that are sitting at the table next to me. Oh, we're from Florida. Well, that's an odd thing to do, to come to Canada for the winter. And she said, no, we're just heading back. And I said, oh, well, are you excited about returning into Trump territory? Oh, we're both Trump voters. And I said, okay, well, we should stop talking now.
You didn't say that.
I did. I did. I said we should, because this is not going to go anywhere good. And they just kept talking, right? And
to you.
To me, yeah.
So they were evangelical.
I don't know whether they didn't come across as evangelicals. They came across as more Michigan militias, more kind of right to bear arms kind of. And it seems evangelicals absolutely are willing to put up, it seems, with almost anything to bring about the return of Jesus Christ, because that is apparently their goal, right? They want, that's why they support Israel, because when Israel is in control of the Mount of Olives or someplace in there's someplace in the Bible that it's stated that this is specifically where Christ is going to return to earth, and only when the nation of Israel is in uncontested control of that particular part of the world, will Christ feel safe to come back, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why the evangelicals are rabidly in support of Israel. Why they are willing to put up with people like Donald Trump and Roy Moore in simply to support the conservative agenda is, I don't get it. I don't know how you can.
These two people that you saw missed a basic social cue. Am I wrong?
On the day, they missed the basic social cue of me telling them not to talk to me about this.
Right, that's a basic social cue.
Yeah, and
that qualifies in the spectrum of autism, does it
not? Grapes of Wrath, taking Highway 66, Route 66 out to California.
Okay.
It's the same people that have lost all their cushy blue collar manufacturing jobs. The Rust Belt people, the farmers, all of these people are the ones who have persistently been at the cutting edge
mm-hmm.
of distress. They're the ones who actually, they're on the outside of the wheel as it turns, and they get crushed beneath the wheel of progress.
It's a little bit like player piano. People like mechanics and worker people who used to be valued, and over time have been segmented away from the ruling class.
I like that Rolling Stone line's about, kind of this guy's still making perfecting plans for sealing wax. There are people, so the history has passed them by,
mm-hmm.
right? And it happened in the Dust Bowl in the 30s, and it happened, and they were the beneficiaries of a post-war boom, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the 60s and the 70s. It lasted until basically things started to go south after, I think, the OPEC crisis in the early 70s, when everything started to get more expensive and companies started to realize, trucking and costs are going to skyrocket. We need to go somewhere where we can pay people cents on the dollar.
Yeah, that was around Nixon's trip to China.
Yeah. So they had 25 years, maybe 30 years of affluence, and it was enough for a generation to be installed, and good for them, right? It's enough for a generation of people who had never had access to that level of independence and affluence. Malcolm Gladwell talks about in the 40s, I guess in the 30s, you get people who had the benefit of tremendous access to education and empowerment through the governments trying to bootstrap the economy up by building infrastructure in the way of highways and bridges and public works projects like schools and libraries. And you get people who were highly educated, excessively educated, couldn't get jobs as engineers and mathematicians and your theoreticians of certain. So they had to go and get jobs teaching people. So you had extraordinarily educated public teachers who grounded an entire generation in a higher level of public education than had ever really been known before, right? So that group of people, that cohort, I guess is the term, that came to age in the post-war, in the late 40s and 50s, had the benefit of I guess they grew up to the 30s and 40s with the education, and then they get the GI Bill after the war, and that was an extraordinary springboard, right? And they just kept climbing up and climbing up and climbing up. And when things kind of dissolve, when it comes to pass that their supports, the supports of their bridges are made of sugar and salt, to paraphrase Coldplay, I can understand how they would be outraged. You know, that who isn't outraged when they find that their world, the underpinnings of what they thought was solid, are in fact ephemeral and not coming back, right? And these people that I sat around and had a coffee with, were talking about all the jobs that are coming back, and all the companies that Trump was going to bring back, and he's going to resuscitate so many businesses, and they're saying this on one hand, but on the other hand they're saying, well, yes, I understand that that it's the corporation's fault for exporting these jobs in the first place, because why would they pay someone $30 an hour when they can pay them $20 a day? So I said, well, what's changed? What will have changed? And they're not able to. There's nothing occupying the middle ground between the two positions. Yes, this is bad on one hand. Kind of evil robber barons exported our jobs, but there's a great space. And then the other hand is, but Donald Trump is going to bring it all back, right?
So the good old days are probably the years from about 35-ish to, some people think it's later than 73. But, we have our recessions, 73, 82, late 80s.
There is,
2005.
I was listening to someone interview Lawrence O'Donnell, MSNBC pundit, and he started working on Daniel Moynihan's Senate staff re-election to the Senate. Daniel Moynihan is the New York Senate seat that Hillary Clinton took over when Daniel Moynihan retired. And this guy, Lawrence O'Donnell, wrote for Hollywood, and then there was a big strike in the late 80s, I guess, early 90s, and being an Irish guy from Southie, Moynihan offered the job to this guy, Lawrence O'Donnell, who worked for 7 years on the Senate staff, and based on that and his writing experience in Hollywood, he was given one of the jobs as one of the prime writers on Aaron Sorkin's The West Wing. Right, so he was one of the chief writers in that whole thing. He crafted the whole idea, right? And they were saying it's like nobody in the studios were saying this is never going to work, right? There's no doctors saving people's lives. There's no car chases. There's no cops locking anybody up. You've got a series of guys in neckties getting mildly exercised about things, and it's true, right? That's exactly what the ideas were esoteric, and the concerns were, kind of intangible, and then there was no car chases. So
that was the last White House-based series I watched.
I think that was the only White House-based series that I think I can't think of. Am I wrong? I can't think of another one.
Well, House of Cards.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, yeah, the House of Cards. Yeah, but
What?
that was personality driven. I think I don't think it would have been quite as successful if it hadn't been for Kevin Spacey. If you'd had like Jeff Goldblum or somebody in there, I don't think Kevin Spacey is the one who pulled that off.
And just to be show businessy, Lawrence O'Donnell's on after Rachel Maddow on MSNBC weeknights.
Yes, they are number 1 and number 2 on the MSNBC's.
I'm a huge fan of him. I was had my nose out of joint when he apologized for his. There's a YouTube going around that has Lawrence O'Donnell.
Him flipping out about the hammering?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which I love every second of. It's a beautiful piece.
Well, anything taken out of context can be used as a bludgeon.
He's trying to do a show.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I just totally sympathize with him.
But you're at a pinnacle. You're in a position where the people who are looking at this YouTube video, all they're thinking of is tantrum, right? It's. I mean, I saw a 5-second bit or maybe a 2-second bit about Matt Lauer. You know, kind of in a similar situation. He's in studio, right? You know, kind of it's in between. Like station breaks or whatever, right? And he's just looking at somebody saying, well, stay standing there, I like the view, right? Who the hell knows what that's about? But in the context that it was generated and presented, it was about something lecherous. It was about some poor, unfortunate victim, you know, kind of just standing there doing her job and being perceived as a sex object.
Or had she been blocking the window for the last 5 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah.
We don't know. We absolutely don't know, and this is the problem with the social media as a content generator. If that content is news, right? We don't have any backstory. We don't have any structure. It's low-hanging fruit, all of it, right? And you just cherry pick, and then you decorate whatever cake you friggin' want.
He's complained about the hammering several times. He's complained about the sound in his ears several times. Like, if you keep complaining and nothing happens, I think even if you watch the clip, he starts off kind of calm, and he gets madder and madder because he's trying to do a show. He is under some pressure. But anyway, that's just me.
I understand that that 45-second or 2-minute clip was compiled over a period of 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, if you're in a soundproof studio and you're the only one that can hear someone banging over your head, and you're hearing people in your ear in the microphones, and you're trying to get hold of someone in the hallway outside a soundproof booth, you need to yell.
Yeah. Anyway,
sorry.
I like him.
Just to finish my thought, Lawrence O'Donnell made me think about Aaron Sorkin, who's one of my favorite writers. I think he's a right-thinking dude, and I think he's a righteous dude. And this is something else that I quoted to these people in the coffee shop. I said one of my favorite writers had said that the way that you win elections is to gather a group of middle-income or lower voters and middle-age or older voters, and you spin for them a tale of what things were like in the good old days. And you tell them how their lives have changed, and then you draw a violent focus on a group or a single person and say, these are the people who are to blame. And you use that as a fulcrum to, that's how you win elections. And and now Aaron Sorkin said that in a movie just 20 years ago. 25 years ago, The American President, whenever the hell that was produced. And that's exactly how Donald Trump won the presidential election. He used that 30% of people, the grapes of wrath people, the Tom Joads and his family, and he used them as a fulcrum to accelerate himself into a position where he had no business being. And it's curious to see such a clear and exact expression of something a quote that's 20 odd years old.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Sorkin's a god.
Let me ask you an intellectual question. Donald Trump, Yosemite Sam, or Foghorn Leghorn? Which one is he?
I would say he's Donald Duck. But I would say I don't think he's one or the other. I think he's got the tantrums of Yosemite Sam and the blustery buffoonishness of Foghorn Leghorn. So I would say he's more Donald Duck. He's got the tantrums.
Mm-hmm.
Yosemite Sam was, even though he was kind of violent and because he was a small guy, if he didn't have the guns, you could just take him. You could just ignore him, right?
I would lift him by his mustache.
Yes, or pick him up and punt him.
And Foghorn Leghorn, now he has a photographic memory for sayings, colloquialisms. He's Foghorn Leghorn. You might put him down a bit because he's always got some saying that sounds like it's from 1880. But I guess he has negative connotations because he sounds very plantation.
Well, but he's harmless. I mean, he's nothing but bluster and bombast. But I mean, all of his aggression is focused at one particular individual. It's not writ large and spread wide, right? Whereas as Yosemite Sam is, pretty much he violently opposes anything that gets in his way. Whereas Foghorn Leghorn's just he's looking at teaching that dog a lesson, right? When it comes to his little scrawny, broodmare chickens or that little tiny,
the chicken hawk.
He's very, very even that little weasel that yeah. He's the soul of courtesy and generosity, right? You said so. I don't think either one of those is an apt avatar for Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something a little more directionless.
My worldview is a little narrow.
No, I think I think actually, if you were to blend the two,
mm-hmm.
Yosemite, Foghorn Sam, then you're speaking a little more along the lines. But Foghorn Leghorn is bluster and bombast without the dark side, without the sharp edges.
I've been re-examining Wile E. Coyote.
Oh, poor Wile! I hate the Roadrunner.
Right, but there's a couple episodes where Wiley speaks. He's a refined person of reading. He's got all those diagrams up. He's done a lot of the homework. If it weren't for, then flash to another couple ideas they ran where we see the artist's pencil erasing the narrative a bit. So I'm thinking one of the reasons I never was 100% comfortable with the whole Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner was this divine intervention. Because were it not for either a divine intervention or that artist's pencil, Wiley should win every time. I mean, and then we just cut to this idea where Wiley puts up a picture in front of a cliff face, and the Roadrunner, of course, just continues down the highway through it. And when Wiley tries it, a truck hits him from the other direction. This divine intervention that, with all the smarts and craft work.
I think it's Darwinian. I think it's Amy Semple McPherson. I think it's God over, it's faith over science. because the Roadrunner, he's fully seated and resonant in his own belief. All he does, he's just happiness and mindful purpose, and he's just booting along. Whereas, kind of Wiley is trying to intercede on his own behalf through intellect, and it seems that that's what that is all about. No matter how hard you try, if you don't have your feet grounded in the effortless grace of faith, if you try to exist in that purely intellectual realm, you're not only going to fail, but like you said, the Deus Ex Machina is going to come in with a big pencil eraser and tip the balance in against you.
Is it like reason against Trump?
Yeah. Trump is bulletproof.
And it's because of the one-dimensional simplicity of the surface nature of conservative thinking, and then compounded against a democratic or liberal view, which is more complex, that we are foisted on our own petard somehow. In a recent, I think it was the Missouri speech earlier this week, almost in the same breath, but probably a paragraph later, he mentions trade unions and then has to editorialize trade unions. You know what a disaster they are. And then a few sentences later, he's talking about, somebody with 2 part-time jobs, 3 part-time jobs making less than somebody on welfare.
Coming up on the next episode of TMI.
Dave speaks to Paul Gunter from Beyond Nuclear in Washington, D.C.
Follow us on Twitter at @ThatArcher. Rate and review us on iTunes. And listen on our webpage, tmi.twxnet.com. Or send us an email, archer@twxnet.com.
I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to shoot in there that's fun and weird, or you want to?
Have you ever heard of? There's something I keep wanting to actually talk to you about. I sent you something a couple weeks ago. It was about something called the Wood Wide Web. But this story was about the web of communication between trees. Like, I think you and I have talked about the largest living organism on Earth is a grove of aspen trees or alder trees in Colorado. Like 18 to 20 acres of trees. They're all interconnected by their root structure. And I thought, that's trippy. But what it appears, according to this documentary that I listened to, that the connection extends beyond the tree's actual root structure into tunnels of interconnecting tubules of fungus.
I'm told this was talked about on a Joe Rogan podcast, 1035, with Paul Stamets.
Well, it was talked about. I heard about it and I was seeing as how you broke the cherry. I heard about it on a Radiolab episode.
Interesting.
Which I think is higher up on the intellectual food chain.
I don't know. Apparently, Joe Rogan's been mentioning some articles lately about some of his comments.
Well,
anyway,
still, mine is bigger than yours, I think.
No, you could be right.
Well, I'm pretty sure I sent you the one about the Wood Wide Web. I forget what it was called, mostly because I did want to talk about it at some point, or at least it's something that I thought was friggin' bananas.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for an opportunity to listen to the article again and maybe do a little more research and talk about it. But I'll have to maybe do that another time.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I would recommend. I'm glad that either Joe Rogan or the Radiolab that I sent you.
Well, it could be the same guy went and was he a guest on Radiolab? Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. I think it was two women, or at least there was a Canadian woman from UBC or Simon Fraser that started the whole thing.
Well, there could be a few people looking into it.
I suspect there probably are.
But this feeds into the "we're all connected" narrative.
It absolutely does, and that seems to be a level of insightful self-preservation that you would not necessarily accredit to vegetable matter.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this story about the fungus, the tiny little like smaller than like eyelash hair sized tubules of fungus that connect the roots of the cilia like roots of trees are the things that are responsible for their the pathways of collecting minerals and exchanging minerals for glucose. So they're saying that if trees, if they didn't have these fungus collecting minerals from breaking down insect life and tiny pebbles and stuff, and then exchanging the minerals for glucose with the trees would not have the ability to grow higher than a meter or two.
Interesting.
So
companies like Monsanto with their Roundup and stuff, I wonder what effect that has on these fungi.
Yeah, it's a precursor for us living off world, I think is what it's
Monsanto.
Yeah, they're killing it. Is it Monsanto that's narconicotinoids or the.
Don't quote me on this, but I think that's a Bayer product. But
I think you're right.
But on the other hand, I thought they bought each other or something recently, actually. So actually, you might be right.
Yeah. Well, I think Monsanto. I think I'm kind of fairly comfortable with the idea that Monsanto is the first among equals in the evil pharmaceutical evil empires.
People don't know this, and I'm pretty sure this is correct chronologically, but so one of the evil sites of nuclear is this Oak Ridge National Labs, ORNL, where a lot of the nuclear experiments have continued to be conducted. It's even said that fracking was invented on the ORNL grounds. They're the first people to dig really deep and then inject a dye and use hydraulic fluid to fracture the rock, then dig the rock up and then split it in half and show you the dye penetrating the rock. If anything evil, it seems to have been developed at ORNL. But what people don't really realize is that before Union Carbide ran ORNL, Union Carbide is responsible for the Bhopal disaster, if you recall that, a little claim to fame. Before Union Carbide was the contractor that ran ORNL, Monsanto ran ORNL. So they go back a long way in getting giant government contracts, being the pet of government, and presiding. They're kind of like the Darth Vader. They're in the group of Death Star.
Anything can be turned to nefarious purpose, I think. I remember someone speculating. It might have been you. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Someone was talking about the guy who made. There's a single guy who made the use of Freon, used Freon or discovered the Freon made large-scale refrigeration a viable reality, and saved tens of millions of lives with, kind of food and cooling, made huge changes in the comfort and safety and succor of people the world over, hundreds of millions conceivably, but also is responsible directly for the degradation of the ozone layer.
Yeah.
So there's no free lunches, and there's nothing really written in black and white. There's always a price to be paid, it would seem. Kind of the how long did it take to get lead out of gasoline?
Yeah.
40, 50 years. I mean, there was still leaded gasoline when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, that's got to be one of the more toxic everyday things. There was lead in friggin' paint on babies' cribs.
Yeah.
It's.
I've probably eaten a handful of that myself.
I'm sure I have as well. Yeah.
Listen on our webpage, on iTunes, or wherever you find podcasts. For links and show notes, visit tmi.twxnet.com.
Okay, give me a
No, I got the hiccups. I'm done.
today.
I got the hiccups, dude. I just said that.
Today. You're like Miranda sings. I'm Dave Archer in Toronto.
And I'm Kevin Weber in the Beaches.